You're about to listen to the Complete Developer Podcast, the podcast by coders and for coders about all aspects of life as a developer.
I'm Will, the curmudgeonly experienced developer.
And I'm Beej, the optimistic newbie developer. Welcome to another episode of Complete Developer Podcast. Before we get started, Will, what have you been fighting this week?
Well, I am looking at case fans.
Yeah, yours makes a lot of noise.
Yeah, I've got one that's starting to go, and you may be able to hear it in the background on the podcast. We can't actually get rid of the sound.
I've worked a lot on that, and I've even, I think I mentioned it to our friend Jason down in Atlanta, who does a lot of audio stuff.
Yeah, there's really not a lot that you can do.
Yeah, there's not much we can do in editing. He actually suggested doing some, a barrier around it.
Yeah, or I could get new case fans. Like, the other thing is they've got these LED lights on them that are blue, and I realize I've kind of always hated that. I don't like blue LEDs. For some reason, it's like if I come into a dark room and there's blue LEDs, they creep me out a lot more than red does. I don't know. Like I have a deep-seated psychological dislike, and I'm like, why have I not changed these? And it's gotten louder, and I really didn't notice how much louder it was until I listened to some of the recent podcasts where you can hear it in the background. And yeah, it's terrible. And now that I notice it, like, it's got to go. I'm kind of building up an order of stuff. Like, I've got to get a new mouse because the mouse I've had for like 6 years and some change, and it's past its prime. The mouse pad under it I've had for close to 20.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you had that mouse pad when we met.
Yeah, it's the mouse pad I got it's 1997, so it's 18 years.
The mouse looks like it's 18 years old.
Yeah, and the mouse pad is beat half to death, so it needs to go. I want to get a rack mounted battery backup. I've got several other things I want to get, so I'm basically just shopping right now for different bits and pieces. I want a VESA mount, to put a monitor on the server rack.
Yeah.
Instead of, because like right now I've got a monitor sitting there that's on a desk by the server rack with a cable run around, and that's just kind of lame looking. There's a bunch of year-end pieces, I guess I'm trying to get sorted out. So what are you into?
Oh, well, I've actually had some slugging matches recently. The other day, my mom texted me.
You got in a slugging match with your mom?
Yep. Just pop, pop. No.
That's why you look so rough today. I think Dolores could kill you in a fight.
No, she texted me because she was trying to print some paperwork. I learned a new term when the executor of an estate is female.
Executrix.
Yes.
Yes.
She is the executrix of my uncle's estate and has been kind of dealing with paying his bills and everything like that. And so, but she had some paperwork from the lawyer she needed printed, and she couldn't get it to print on her computer. And I've mentioned my mom's laptop. I don't know how many times it is. It's running. I think it has Vista on it.
Yeah, it seems like
it has Word 2003, if that says anything. And so, and
it was probably Word 2003 was probably new.
I went down, and so I was like, all right, well, I'll come down. I'll help you out. So I go, and I'm sitting at her laptop, and it was a PDF file. I was like, all right, well, hey, she was trying to print it from the browser, and it wasn't sending. I was like, do you have Adobe on here? She said, yeah, I do. I was like, okay, cool. She has Adobe Photoshop Elements.
Well, I mean, at least the PDF reader is free.
Yeah, that's what I told her.
But Chrome has got the ability to load it, and it usually prints pretty well.
So I was able to open it up in Photoshop and tried to print it, and it printed the first page, and that was it because it loaded it as an image. After a while, I said, you know what? I'm just going to email it to myself. I'll print it from my printer. So I emailed it to myself, went back to my printer, and opened it up, clicked print. First page prints out, and then the printer stops because it's out of toner.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And I was like, all right, well, no big deal. No big deal. I am prepared. I have another cartridge of toner. So I open the printer up, put the new cartridge in, get it all set up, and that cartridge was bad. Like entire paragraphs were not printing.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah, one thing I've learned with a lot of those, because that's an inkjet printer. One thing I've learned with a lot of those is when you put a new cartridge in, is like print a test page or two, so that any gunk that's on the cartridge kind of comes off.
Oh, I did that. I tried to print out pages 2 and 3 of that document 5 times.
Wow.
Yeah. So finally I said, you know what? Your printer prints, you just can't open it. So I'm going to open it in Word and convert it to a Word 2003 document and email it back to you. It's a very hacky way of doing it, but...
Yeah, sometimes you just have to.
It worked.
Wow. So, speaking of hacky ways of doing things, about ready to roll that music?
Oh yeah, I love that music.
I know.
This week for IoTs, I have something kind of interesting for you guys, especially those of you that have even more experience than Will and I do with IoT. The IEEE Internet of Things newsletter. I think I've talked about this before on the show. They are looking for authors, and I'll post a link to the flyer that they put out. But it's a pretty neat little gig. It's a bi-monthly online publication that features practical and timely technical information and forward-looking commentary on IoT developments and deployments around the world. Definitely something to look into, especially if you are interested in technical writing. You just want to get your name out there, or like me, you're fascinated by IoT and want to get paid to learn about it. So that is the IEEE Internet of Things e-newsletter. It came out last year in 2014, and they're looking for authors for their various posts.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about taking control of your life by setting goals. And BJ has been the one that's actually outlined most of this material.
Yeah, it's we kind of did a preview of it a few weeks back in the motivation episode. And so I want to start off with a quote from Tony Robbins. Setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible. Sounds very motivational, like it should be up on a poster or something.
Either that or it's from Deepak Chopra.
No.
One of those two, anyway. We also have another quote here. Microsoft has 2 goals in the last 10 years. One was to copy the Mac, and the other was to copy Lotus's success in the spreadsheet, basically the applications business. And over the course of the last 10 years, Microsoft accomplished both of those goals. And now they are completely lost. Steve Jobs.
Got to give it to good old Steve Jobs.
Yeah, he knew exactly how to twist the knife a little bit there, didn't he? He did. Wow, that's cold.
So to start off, let's talk about why we should set goals, especially setting personal goals. The first thing on the list that I have here is to get stuff done.
It doesn't say stuff on the outline we have, but we're PG and we're nice people.
And going along with the title of the episode, it helps you to take control of your life.
Yeah, because you don't want to be passively letting stuff happen to you.
Exactly.
Because then stuff happens to you and you're not controlling it, so your goals don't get met, and somebody else's do, typically.
At your expense, usually.
Yeah.
And this also, setting goals helps you to recognize where you have the control and where you don't. It can help give focus in the short term to things that to motivation.
Right, because you have something that you're trying to do right now, and you have an end game in mind, in the short term, so it's easy to keep going, or it's easier.
Yeah, that's why we talked about it in the motivation episode. Also, in the long term, it can give significance to more long-term improvements.
Right, because if it's something you've been working on your whole life, it's a huge deal when you finally get there.
Mm-hmm. And it also helps to build confidence by being able to measure and take pride in your achievements.
Yeah, because I mean, I've had this before where you get a lot of stuff done in 1 year, and you feel like crap because you're not ever looking back at it to even realize what you've done because you're not measuring.
You don't realize how much you've gotten done, and you don't, when you don't have those goals set, like the Steve Jobs quote said, you may reach what your goals are, and then
if you don't lost. Well, if you don't realize it, you'll still feel like you haven't achieved it. You'll still be carrying yourself like you haven't achieved the goal. There's latency involved there. If for your mind to kick over, you want it to do that quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because then you can move on to other goals.
Right.
All right. So we're going to kind of take a top-down approach in this episode, talking about setting long and short-term goals. And if you guys have listened to the motivation episode, this is where we kind of gave a bit of a preview. And we related it to programming in a way. Yep. We have a little bit more in-depth in this one. So we're going to start off with the project level. These are your lifetime goals. And these are the big overall things that you want to do within your lifetime. And they can be broken down into different areas, such as your career, as in what level do you want to reach? Financial, how much do you want to earn? And by what stage, by what age do you want to have earned that?
It doesn't necessarily always have to be entirely financial.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the finances are a way of getting that goal. That's how you grease the wheels. Another one's education.
Which is the same way. It's what skills do you need to acquire and reach your goals?
Right. It's not just education for its own sake. None of these are.
And then you have family. This is something where you have to ask yourself, do you want to get married? Do you want to have children? And, by what age do you want to have done that?
Yeah, because that's something that you don't want to get to you don't want to get into your 40s or 50s and then realize that, oh yeah, I really would have liked to have children, because that's not a real good spot to be.
Then last on the list, we have physical goals. This can be athletic, good health in old age, and also what steps you're taking towards those. These are just kind of like the big ones. There's a full list that will be in the show notes, just of all the different types of lifetime goals that you can set up. Next, we have the namespace, or your long-term plan. This is your 5, 10, or 15-year goals. And it's kind of the breakdown of the project goals.
And they're more, and you'll notice these get more specific as well.
These are kind of like, where should you be at these different points on your way towards those lifetime goals?
Right, because it's basically, it's telemetry for your goals. You're figuring out, okay, am I headed in the right direction? If I continue going the way I'm going right now, am I going to get to where I want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
To further break that down, we'll move into the class level, or your mid-range goals. These are going to be your 3, 6, and 12-month goals. And these are the objectives that you have to reach those namespace goals. This is where you really need to prioritize which goals are important. These are like the major points in the outline of each goal that you have.
Right, and they're more specific and more measurable.
Yeah, they start to become more measurable than, did I reach it by this amount of time?
Yeah.
It's, you can break them down into, okay, I'm going to do this by, at this point, or I'm going to do these set of things. Following that, we have the method level, which is our short term, kind of if you've heard of the 30, 60, 90-day plan.
Which I noticed from the outline actually overlaps with the class, because 90 days is roughly 3 months.
Yes.
Which is okay, because I know lots of programmers that write entire methods when they should have written a class. In fact, I've been debugging those all day.
Well, if you look down at the bottom of this part of the outline, it'll talk about the overlap. It's good that you brought it up. Basically, in the shorter term goals, about mid-range down, there's going to be overlap, and this is to help with breaking down the goals into manageable chunks. And sometimes you have a goal that just can't be broken down any smaller than 3 months or 90 days.
Yeah, and then the other thing too is like your 30-day goals. Some of those type of goals are also set up for the other things, like forming a new habit. That, that's going to take you about 30 days of sustained practice.
This level is your plan of action to meet each of the objectives for your class. And this is where those priorities that you set in the class level start to really take form. And we're going to talk more about priorities towards the end of the podcast. Also, a 30, 60, 90-day plan is really good for interviews when you go into a new job, especially if you're interviewing for a management position.
Yes. It's actually pretty good for a junior dev. If you go in there with some kind of plan like that, you will knock their socks off a whole lot better than most people that go in there and they get the job and then they just float.
There will be some links in the show notes to how to set up a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And if you subscribe to our newsletter, in our extras, we'll even send out some templates for developing those. And finally, we come down to the last level, the loop.
Yeah, and we called this the closure in the previous episode, but after some thought, a lot of programmers really don't understand closures as well as they think they do. Mm-hmm. And so we thought this might be a little bit better terminology. And the loop is your more immediate goals, like up to a month. Typically, it's your day and your week, though. Mm-hmm. And the reason is that's a regular cycle.
Exactly.
A very, very tight timeline.
These are your to-do list goals. These are the small steps that you take each day, each week to meet those larger goals. Like we said, it's a top-down approach. And when you're setting your goals, you start off with the bigger ones. And
again, these overlap. The shorter term goals kind of overlap because they have a little bit more of a regular cadence. And so, sometimes you can have a goal that's a big chunk or that's really, really important, but you get it done in a week. And it's a stepping stone, or it may be just little pebbles off the boulder kind of thing. It's not the larger thing. This isn't a perfect metaphor, but this is one that we kind of developed as something for you guys to think about.
I know some of us have heard of SMART goals before, the S.M.A.R.T. There's a few different variations on the original acronym. I have chosen the variation that I used to use when teaching goal setting. There's a lot of material. It's one of the more popular ones, so we're going to go through that. This will probably be the bulk of the episode. So the first one, the S in this scheme, stands for specific. This is the who, what, when, where, and why of your goals. Kind of reminds me when I used to be a reporter for the school newspaper. Whenever I'd do an interview, those were the questions I would write down. I'd just write who, what, when, where, and why, and then I would make up each question based on that format.
You can think about this if somebody was interviewing you when you get to your end goal. Mm-hmm. These are the questions they'd ask you.
Exactly. Now, in contrast, general goals, they're better for long term that can be broken down, and you want to get more specific as you get shorter term in your breakdown of your goals. We have a few examples here, and these are going to follow us through the entire SMART goal setting. This is general versus specific. A general goal would be, I'll lose weight and get into shape. A specific goal would be, I will alternate kettlebell swings 3 days a week and walking 3 days a week to lose 50 pounds and be able to swing 100 reps per arm with a 24-kilo kettlebell by the end of the year.
Is that without stopping?
Yes. Like I said, that's just their example.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal.
No, we'll get into attainable in a minute. Next, we have general goal, I will get a job as a developer. A more specific version of that goal is, I will learn C# and ASP.NET and start applying to positions in the next year because most of the jobs in my area, in Nashville, are in the .NET framework. The third one we have, general goal, I will be financially independent. So that's a good idea to have. A lot of people want that.
Yeah, but then you get those lotto tickets and it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Whereas a more specific goal would be, I will design and build a product that sells and creates a recurring stream of revenue. And I would even argue that this is actually a general goal.
That is a very general.
In the midst of that myself.
Yeah. That is general, but compared to the first one, it is more specific, and as a lifetime goal, it is specific. At the project level, that is specific. At the class or method level, no, that is not near specific enough. The M in SMART stands for measurable. And you want to define specific criteria for each goal so that you can track it. And you need to be able to qualify your progress.
Right, because you can't manage things that you don't measure.
Exactly. And so, in the notes here, I have examples: measurable and not measurable.
I like the C# syntax there. That's nice.
Thank you. So, the going with the weight loss, the measurable goal is I'll weigh myself each week at the same time, tracking my food intake, walking, and kettlebell swings. This example as a non-measurable would be, I'll weigh myself when I feel I've lost some weight.
Which you'll never feel you lost weight because you won't feel any urgency.
Mm-hmm.
And also, your feeling of having lost weight is incredibly inaccurate.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how much weight you'd lose without feeling it or noticing, and then it's like you'll lose 10 pounds, and then the next 2 pounds, you're like, whoa, I lost weight.
Yeah, because your belt notch.
Yeah.
Or things like that. I mean, the reason we have scales is because we're kind of crap at measuring, just by eyeballing things.
The next example for measurable would be, I will use a reverse syllabus to keep track of the concepts I have learned and what I'll need to get a job. And you know what a reverse syllabus is, right?
Kinda.
All right, well, a syllabus is where you take a class and the professor gives you a list of what's going to be going on in the class.
Right.
A reverse syllabus is where you look at the job market and see what skills...
And then build your own syllabus.
Yes.
Backwards. Okay. I'd never heard it called that. I would just think that's called common sense. But I guess academia's got to have a word for everything.
I don't know where I heard it, but I really liked it, so I've been using it ever since. And the non-measurable way of doing this would be, I'll read up on coding and start applying for jobs when I'm ready.
Yeah, and this is something we've noticed. BJ and I do a lot of talking to people that are starting to get into software development, and I can just about peg who is going to make it and who isn't.
Yeah, I'm starting to get that way too.
Based on the conversations we have, because the people that we speak to that do not have measurable goals, if you come back in 5 years, they're still going to be sitting right there, or they're going to be doing something else. Because you really don't get anywhere without that. And this is kind of something you see in development a lot. Oh, I'm going to learn coding. It's like, no, I'm going to learn X. Mm-hmm. Pick something and go do that. So another measurable goal is using market research. I'll determine the product to create and set reasonable deadlines for each stage. An unmeasurable goal would be, I'll work on it during my spare time. And this is something I've actually learned on my side project, is because when we started out, I'm going to work on it on my spare time. And the goal last year was actually to release that product, my side project, in January.
I remember.
That was the initial goal. And we worked and we worked, but we didn't have an end game in mind. And so, measurable milestones for success. Now we do.
And you're a lot closer to release.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we actually kind of got some people in there.
So now the A in the SMART stands for attainable. So we have specific, measurable, and attainable. While doing my research on this, I came across a Forbes article that is titled "SMART Goals Can Be Done." And after reading the article, I have to say I completely disagree. It's a misunderstanding of the use of the SMART goals. Having read, I think it's George Doran's article, one of the origins of SMART goal setting and management, what they said in that article, and there will be a link to it, but I do disagree with it. In my opinion, if your goals, well, what they're saying is that if you make your goals attainable and realistic, then you're not really shooting for the stars. And what they don't understand is...
most people live on the planet.
Exactly.
Shooting for the stars, I mean, that's great and all, but that's the mindset of somebody that says, I'm going to be a basketball star. It worked for Michael Jordan, and it's worked for a few others.
Mm-hmm.
But the vast majority of people who've said that, it hasn't worked for. I mean, crap, we're in Nashville. How many people do you know that are going to break into the music business any day now?
Yeah. I have a lot of friends that are there. There's that level where you're above doing shows for free, but you're not superstar level yet.
Yeah.
And that is a huge level. And I have a lot of friends there that are really good. Yeah. They just haven't had that break that the superstars have.
Yeah, and I've got one that's sort of made the jump, but he's realistic. Mm-hmm. You know, he works as a waiter a lot of times, and he does other stuff, and that's totally fine. You know, he's being realistic about it. It's an attainable goal for him, but he's not going to throw everything else away for that attainability, because some goals are big enough that you pretty much have to throw every other goal aside for it to be attainable.
When I was writing this, I couldn't help but think of an old Simpsons episode. If your goals aren't attainable, you're just like Homer Simpson. Yeah. You're S.M.A.R.T. I am so smart.
Yep.
And that goes out to one of our Jasons, because he is a huge Simpsons fan. But attainable and realistic doesn't mean it's an easy goal.
Right, and I think maybe it's a good time to kind of get some examples in there.
Yeah. So
an attainable goal would be, I will lose 30 pounds as a 3-month goal. And that's a bear. I mean, I've lost 40 in 3 months. Mm-hmm. And holy crap, was there a lot of kettlebell swings and a lot of low carb and, a lot of measuring your macronutrients and everything else.
3 months, or 30 pounds in 3 months is not an easy goal.
Right.
But it is an attainable goal, as opposed to, I'll lose 30 pounds as a 1-month goal.
Yeah, which, I mean, you can do if you got a friend with a samurai sword and you're willing to hold your arm out.
Well, yeah, there's that.
But it's not a sustainable goal long term. Mm-hmm. Another example of an attainable goal would be, I will take a course on C#, on whatever, and produce some samples and start applying for some jobs. An unattainable goal will be, I will start applying for jobs now and learn to code as I go along.
Which I know people who've done that.
Oh, I do too. I clean up their code all the time. I made a career of it.
Then last in the set is, I'll create a useful product and be financially independent in the next 5 to 10 years. That's not a very specific one, but we're not talking about specificity. We're talking about attainability. An unattainable version would be, I'll build the next Facebook and be a billionaire by next year.
Right. And, of course, if you're doing that, you will ping me with, work requests, and you're going to want me to work for exposure. Mm-hmm. I've been on the other end of that one quite a few times. Look, you're not going to build the next social network for cats or whatever, so get over it. Do something that you can actually do. Do something boring, like accounting. Something that doesn't really get a lot of attention. That's not all, look at me, but it's something that everybody needs. The next item in the SMART list is relevant. And basically what this entails is that goals require time and commitment, so that when it gets tough, they'll still matter. And this is something I ran into in my side project. Crap, for a while this spring, I was working 80-hour work weeks. I would work at the day job and get the 40-hour work week in, and then another 40 on the side project. And when things are like that, you have to have something that you actually want to do. And I think we've got a pretty good product. I really believe in it, and it's interesting to me, and that makes a huge difference when you're sitting up 11:30 on a Friday night, knowing that, okay, I'm going to probably go to bed in another 30 minutes, and then I'm going to get up at 6.
Yeah, or when you stay up till 7 to get something published.
Yeah, and that's the same thing with the podcast.
Yeah, I did that last week.
If we didn't enjoy this, I mean, it would be awful.
Oh, yeah.
And I know a lot of people that will go after goals that are attainable and, they can be measured and all that kind of stuff. But then the goal is something that they're going into for the amount of money that they're going to get. And usually you can watch about 3 months in, at least, as far as people's side projects and startups, everything just blows up and they just walk away and they just threw all that time away.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I know
basically what you want here, and this sounds like a really caustic way to put it, you want the goal to be relevant enough that you can get into sunk cost fallacy and survive. And I hate to put it that way because it sounds really bad, but that's about where you have to be with really really important goals, because it's going to get hard at some point. Nothing that's worth doing is easy.
And you also have to look at, it matters to you now, but is it going to be important to your life? Will it matter 3 months from now when things get really tough?
Yeah.
And a few questions to ask about your goals. Is it worthwhile? Does it match other efforts or needs that I have?
Yeah, and is it congruent with your personality? Because if it isn't, you're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that would be like me, me writing the next version of the Unreal Engine or something. I mean, I suppose I could probably eventually cobble something together that maybe doesn't suck for some minuscule portion of a percentage of the population, less than 1%. But is that something that would mean anything to me? And the answer is no. Yeah. And it's not congruent with my personality. Whereas agricultural accounting apps, sure.
Yeah, it makes sense. Also, you look, is it the right time? Is this applicable to the current environment?
Yeah. I mean, well, we talked about Facebook. The reason Facebook took off was because of timing.
Exactly.
Because there were a bunch of people that had stuff before MySpace, and it didn't explode and lock in a market. Mm-hmm. And then you've got other stuff that's come after Facebook, like Google Plus, that's done exactly what? Nothing. I mean, you have a multi-billion-dollar company, and they couldn't pull it off because their timing was crap, among other things.
Going back to our examples, something that's not relevant is I'm in my second year of medical school, which anyone that's been through it will tell you is the hardest year of medical school. I'm in my second year of medical school, and I want to lose another 10 pounds.
Yeah.
Now, if you wanted to gain 10 pounds, that would probably be a very good goal to have, but losing it, not so much.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe 10 pounds is probably doable by most anybody, but 50? Anything where you're going to actually have to do something when you're second year med student, it's probably not realistic. I could see them losing 10 pounds just from not eating because they're studying so much.
Oh, maybe if they're taking Adderall. That used to be the joke we had, was you could tell who was abusing Adderall by the people who gained weight over the summer. So a relevant version would be, I have a stable job and ample personal time to focus on losing that last 10 pounds.
Right. And it's actually important to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're a little heavy, it's almost not as easy to lose weight as if you're 40 pounds over or better and not happy with it.
I avoided putting this in there, but originally I was going to put in the non-relevant, I want to lose 10 pounds and I'm, 190.
Yeah.
And 5'8". And
because it makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Another one here that's non-relevant is, even though all the jobs in my area are for .NET, I want to learn Ruby because dynamic languages are the future. A relevant one would be, I want to stay in this area, so I'm learning .NET to get the job I want. Although I would debate that, because I think in this particular case, dynamic and non-dynamic languages are kind of converging a little bit.
They really are. This was just something that This is something that I've dealt with because I have a lot of friends that are learning Ruby that I've met through various communities for new coders, and I would like to be able to talk to them, about what they're doing, but I'm not learning Ruby. I'm learning .NET because I want to be in the area I want to be in has .NET jobs.
Well, and it's congruent with the rest of your goals, which pretty much involves staying around here.
Mm-hmm.
And Ruby would make that harder. So it's a goal that gets in the way of other goals because right now there's not a lot of Ruby jobs. We got a lot of healthcare, and those people are not super comfortable with anything that is built that way, even though they should be. That's another topic for another day.
Mm-hmm. And finally, non-relevant. I'm going to create the user interface first and work backwards from there.
I know people that do that. It's really a lot harder that way. I mean, you can do like a slice of it. So you're saying, a relevant version of this would be I will develop my product from a vertical slice approach.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you take a piece of the user interface and you build that, and you build all the way down to the database.
Exactly.
You don't build out all your screens and then go, okay, now I'm going to start wiring it in, because you're going to lose your mind doing that. It makes the goal completely unattainable, even though it's all the same stuff.
And finally, we get to the T in our S.M.A.R.T, and this is time-bound or timely. For your goals, you need to set a start date and have a target date to achieve the goals. Will mentioned urgency earlier. Without a time limit, there is no urgency to take action.
Yeah. I mean, we all know somebody that has had some goal their entire life and has never moved towards it.
Mm-hmm.
And so without that urgency, you're not gonna want to take action because it's comfortable right now not taking action.
Exactly. So with that, we have loose goals and strict goals. Sort of loose time-bound goals and strict time-bound goals. So for our loose goal, I want to lose 50 pounds and get in shape.
Which is a good goal.
It is a good goal.
I'd be rather weird looking if I lost 50 pounds.
A stricter goal in the time sense would be I will lose 10 pounds by March and 50 pounds by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And that's realistic, measurable, and timely.
Another loose goal would be I need a job now, so I'll start studying and applying. And a strict version of that would be to get the position I want, I'm going to spend 15 hours a week studying and start applying at the end of the year. And even putting in some measurable actual achievements instead of just studying.
Yeah.
Would be good there as well. And that's so that you can measure it and so that you have an endpoint there where you feel like you're accountable. Like you feel like you fail when you fail.
Exactly.
Because if it's an open-ended goal, it's always going to happen tomorrow. So why feel bad about it? Sometimes that can be a very good motivating factor. Or if you achieve it in time, the victory is that much sweeter because you pulled it off in time.
You also have to look at this from just the overall SMART goals. If your goal is not very specific, not very measurable, then an exercise goal could be achieved by I walked the dog.
Yeah. Or I did 10 sit-ups and then I ate a bag of Cheetos.
Yeah.
So I know people like that too.
Mm-hmm. And finally, on the last example here for time bound is loose goal of I'll work on it in my spare time. I've said that before for this level. But a more specific time-bound goal would be I've set specific deadlines to meet for each stage of the project.
Yeah, and what I like to do here is actually do an estimate on these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Say, okay, I want to be done by this date and figure out how much time it's going to take to do each goal. And you can actually set up Excel and put the number of hours in that you've put. Mm-hmm. And get feedback. So when you take a day off and you go and you be a slacker for a day, you can see that hit on your schedule right then. You can do that. You can do a better project or something like that. But a lot of people do it in Outlook, and that was eye opening for me. I stopped doing it, but that was part of kind of getting a little bit more goal focused was putting that pain in there.
Now, wrapping up the SMART goal setting, there's some overlap with these. And some of your goals may not fit into all of these criteria. I mentioned George Doran earlier, and in his article he says it should also be understood that the suggested acronym doesn't mean that every objective written will have all 5 criteria.
I just don't know that I agree with that.
Oh, yeah?
I don't. I think it has to have all 5. Because it doesn't happen. It's not a goal then, it's a dream. If it doesn't have all 5, it's like, okay, you're fine for having it, but you have no plan to get there in a realistic sense.
I think, because some of the other stuff I read by him, I think what he's getting at is what we said earlier.
Well, it's easy to disagree with a pull quote.
Oh, yeah, it really is. But
that's why we use them. That's why they're in the media, guys. It's not to actually provide information. It's to provide controversy and eyeballs on the page, if you hadn't figured that out yet.
It's like we said earlier in the Forbes article on being attainable. What they were saying is by making goals attainable, then you're not, reaching for bigger goals. And it's like, no, your bigger goals are, the attainability for them is not going to be the attainability for your small goals.
Right.
The definition of attainable will be different depending on each goal.
Yeah.
And the length of that goal. And I think it's kind of the same. It's kind of what he's saying here is that for specific, your long-term, your project level, or even your namespace level goals, they're going to be more general than your method or your loop goals.
Right. And this kind of feeds into the whole prioritizing and reviewing thing as well. One of the most important things you can do is actually prioritize your goals, because everybody has got a set of things that they want to do, and there's going to be only so many of them that you can do. Mm-hmm. If you really thought about all the stuff you want to do, it's not all possible. You're one person. So
if your goals are SMART goals, then you'll know you need to prioritize them, and you do that by looking at your project level and your namespace level goals and saying, okay, this is what I want now, my more short-term goals, which ones most work towards achieving that? And you also want to review your goals on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I actually do this. I've tried to get more and more in the habit. Like, I'm coming up pretty soon on my yearly review time. Just close to the holidays, I tend to do it either before or after, just because things are calm, and I don't get a lot of those little windows there.
My suggestion would be to set aside a day each month, like the first Saturday of the month or something, to review your goals, and then once a quarter, use that time to review your larger goals.
Yeah, my yearly one tends to be like a whole day.
Yeah.
Of figuring stuff out and thinking and all that. A lot of it tends to be if I'm on a road trip. Like last November, I drove to Florida. Mm-hmm. That was perfect.
Oh yeah,
for figuring out goals there. There and on the way back, and then I'll have smaller reviews. I mean, I try to even do that at the end of the week and think about what went well, what didn't, that sort of stuff.
We've kind of got a breakdown here of each level of goal, and one thing that we have been using with the podcast is Nosebe.
It's Nozbe, and it's a task tracker tool. And I break my projects down on that.
Yeah.
And we'll actually, a little disclosure, we haven't set this up yet, but we may actually have an affiliate link in there. I think they have an affiliate program, but I haven't checked. And unfortunately, I was not ahead of the game enough to look this far down the outline. So, my bad. But hopefully we'll have something there, and that'll be nice.
And these are really good. Nosebe is really good for your action steps.
Yeah, it really is. It's not. You can actually use it for your larger goals as well. You have a project that's like review, and then you schedule your reviews in there, do that, and it'll sync up to Google Calendar and all that. And that, I did that for a little while, and then I got sloppy. Now I just like put it in Google Calendar and go on with my life. But it's a good place to do that, and and it forces you to check it off the list, and you get the nice little dopamine feedback from clicking something away.
And so then your method level goals are going to be the ones you want to review on a monthly basis. Some of them will be a month-long goal. Most of them will be longer than that.
Right.
And, you want to look at your progress towards those goals. And then at your quarterly reviews, look at your class level goals. And then annually, take a look at your project and your namespace goals and see where are you along the path towards that goal.
Or if the goals have changed.
That's true.
Because sometimes that stuff, the things I wanted to do when I was 20, I look back on and I feel like a lot of them were incredibly naive.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually feel that way about goals I had when I was 30.
Yeah.
And stuff changes, you get older.
And we'll talk about that in just a little bit when we talk about maintaining a goal-oriented outlook. Some tips for kind of setting up and selecting or setting your goals is to make them positive statements.
Yes. In other words, you don't say, I'm not going to eat a bunch of junk food. You make positive statements and go, okay, I'm going to eat, I'm going to eat more fish and I'm going to eat more vegetables and that sort of thing, because that's a little bit easier to implement.
Yes.
Even though you're doing exactly the same thing, it's the way you phrase it that really makes the difference.
It goes to the psychology of it. It puts you in, it's a different mindset. You don't feel like you're restricting something.
Right.
You're not cutting something out, you're adding something.
Well, don't think about a pink elephant. Right? If I just say, don't think about a pink elephant, what just popped into your head?
A rhinoceros.
I'm not exactly sure how your brain works, or if it does, my friend. But most people, if you tell them, hey, don't think about a pink elephant, that's the first thing that's going to pop into their head. And it's the same thing with negative goals, is you're actually creating a feedback loop that increases the likelihood that you're going to do that negative thing.
Exactly. Also, you're going to want to write down your goals or type them up.
So typing up a goal is actually pretty good. Getting it down on paper where you can actually review it. Again, this is about the whole measurement thing, because it's very easy to forget what you said you were going to do if you hadn't thought about it all year. And another thing is obviously putting those goals in front of other people so that they can hold you somewhat accountable, or so that you feel that way. And we're actually going to do this at the beginning of the year, or right before. I forget which.
It'll be the next episode after this one. We are going to do our goals for 2016.
Yeah, I always have a hard time remembering what is on the editorial calendar. But that's one of the reasons we're doing this, is to kind of throw those goals out in front of other people. And it doesn't matter if you call me on it or not, because I feel like you might.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to do partly through the year, is go back and review where we are in those goals. Also, you want to keep your method and your loop goals small. Yes,
where they're achievable. This actually feeds into something that we probably need to talk about sometime, is the Pomodoro technique.
And finally, under tips for selecting your goals, is make your goals about performance and not outcome.
Right.
Make them about how well you do.
Yeah, I will swing, like you said about the kettlebells. I'll swing a 24 kilo kettlebell and I'll do 100 swings. On each arm, 3 times a week.
Yeah.
For 10 weeks. Well, if your goal is that, you're going to have a hard time at the beginning, but you'll get through it, right?
Yeah.
But if your goal is, okay, I'm going to do that and it's going to cause me to lose X amount of weight, that may not work. You may have something hormonal going on.
You may bulk up and gain weight.
Yeah. I've known lots of people. That, they're like, they're upset because the way they're measuring the achievement of their goal is wrong. It's like, I've gained 15 pounds, but it's like, yeah, but you're cut like Thor.
Yeah, exactly.
Why are you upset that you gained weight? That's not a problem.
Yeah. And so closing out the episode, let's kind of hit on some ways to maintain a goal-oriented outlook. If the goal that you set was reached too easily, like you set a 30-day goal and you got it in a week, then you need to look at, adjusting your goals to make them a little bit harder.
I did that a couple of years ago because my goal was, my max deadlift, and I feel embarrassed about this now, was 200 pounds or right under that. And I was like, oh, I want my max deadlift to be 300 pounds. And then, like a month into the year, I got to 315.
Yeah.
And then I was sitting there going, well, crap, what do I do? Because I was planning to be here by December. And obviously, push the goal up.
Yeah, you adjust your goals.
If the goal is extremely difficult, break it down and set smaller, simpler goals. The goal here is forward movement and momentum, not huge jumps. You can always speed up or slow down to adjust, but you don't want to try to reach something that's unattainable and just fail, because that breaks your momentum. And
you also want to welcome roadblocks and repeated goals. I've heard a lot about failure mindset in programming, whereas if you never have a failure, you're not really doing it right.
Yeah, and I've known plenty of programmers that never plan for failures in any sense of the word at all. But another thing, you'll see this too with weightlifting. To bring this back up, I got stuck. I think it was around, I want to say it was after I hit the 300-pound goal or whatever. I forget what my exact was, but I hit it really quick, and then I got 10 pounds over that, and it felt like it was 3 months that I could add 5 pounds to the weight, and it felt like it was glued to the floor. I couldn't move it, and then I saw somebody smaller than me lift more than me, and then all of a sudden I could do it. But it's very easy to hit a plateau.
It's something that we've talked about before. I don't remember if it was on the air or not, but you were talking to me about how with moving from one level of development to the next, from like junior to mid-level to senior, like you moved from junior to mid-level really fast and then kind of hit a plateau for a long time. And you're like, then it just jumped.
Yeah, well, I mean, what gets you from level 1 to level 2 is not the same thing gets you from level 2 to level 3.
Yes.
And so these, roadblocks, they also need to be taken as a sign that the goal is valuable, for one. And two, they need to be taken as a sign that, hey, we're about to have a phase shift.
Yeah.
Because if I break through this roadblock, I'm going to jump way up. And that needs to be more of the mindset that you have instead of, oh, I failed.
Yeah. I found how not to do it.
Yeah.
And found out how valuable doing it is.
Well, yeah, you've been getting more and more, honestly, you've been getting more agile with your goals. You've been trimming them down to something that's more achievable. Like you were on psych. I mean, crap, you were trying to do that for 10 years?
Yeah.
You were kind of heading that direction, and you didn't have the smaller goals, and then you did medicine, and that took even less time to trim down, and now you're doing coding, and you're getting some pretty good specificity about what you want. And you're actually taking steps to achieve it, and they're sustainable steps. And I think that's really a good way to keep that goal-oriented outlook. And I guess that pretty much wraps it up.
It does. Like we mentioned a little earlier, next week we're going to give our goals or our New Year's resolutions for 2016. And we'll also be following up on them throughout the year. Before we close everything out, Will, what do you have for us this week for Tricks of the Trade?
Well, this week I have a tool that I use for viewing log files. For instance, if you've got a running process that's constantly writing to a log, you can actually get the log file to show up on screen, and it'll continually update as your app writes to the file. And this tool is called Beartail. That's
I like it.
Yeah, it's BARE, so it's bear as in naked, not bear as in the carnivore, the large carnivore. And TAIL.
See, I like it even better now.
Yeah, and you can get this at bearmetalsoft.com/beartail. I've been using it, for quite a few years. We used it as a log viewer probably 4 or 5 years ago, and it was just an absolute lifesaver because you can drop files in there and it just starts reading them, picking it up, and you can watch everything go through as it's processing. So we were using this for service log files where there is no console. It's just got a dump file that it's putting it out there to. It's a pretty good little time saver. It's a very, very small app. it can get greater than 2 gigs of log files. So if you've got one that's massive, it can open it up and it goes to the end. Because it doesn't have to show you the whole file. Mm-hmm. Right? Notepad and things like that will load the entire file because they don't know where you're going. Beartail, I'm assuming it does do some kind of load, the whole thing where you can scroll up and down, but it knows that what you want is what just happened. And so it's focused there. And so it can get some pretty good sized files going, which if you have poorly written logging code like we did at the time, that can be real handy because I think at one point we had 9 gigs of log files, which was nice, because we were able to troubleshoot the problem we had, and then we could go deal with the log file issue once the system was stabilized.
Yeah.
So this could be a lifesaver in certain circumstances. If you have a question or comment for us, please email us at neckbeards@completedeveloperpodcast.com. Our theme music is an excerpt from Stand By for Titanfall by Pure Bells, available on SoundCloud and licensed under Creative Commons. The intro music for IoTs is OMFG Hello by Argo Fox and is also licensed under Creative Commons and available on SoundCloud. For references, show notes, and to sign up to our email list, be sure and check out the website at www.completedeveloperpodcast.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod and like our page on Facebook to keep up with news about the show. Thanks for listening. See you next time.